Welcome back. Before we tackle a work like Sophocles' Oedipus the King, it's probably best that we have a working vocabulary so that we can talk about the kinds of terms that come up when we're reading this and use them. That way, we can better evaluate how effective tragedies are at being tragic. One of the most obvious things is probably to have a working definition of tragedy. And the definition I'm going to work off of comes from Aristotle's Poetics, a work written around 335 BCE, some 200 years after the golden age of tragedy in Athens. And Aristotle's definition of tragedy is as follows. It is an imitation of a noble and complete action, having the proper magnitude. It employs language that has been artistically enhanced. It is presented in dramatic, not narrative form, and achieves, through the representation of pitiable and fearful incidents, the catharsis of such incidents. Well, that's a mouthful, and this deserves some unpacking so we can talk about what this means. Okay, it has to tell a complete story. It must be serious. And I do mean serious. The other day a student told me that he broke his shoelace that morning while tying his shoes, and he said, "That was totally tragic." And I thought, not really, no, that's not tragic at all. So bad stuff has to happen. And it uses fancy poetic language. It's rare that you'll see an effective tragedy that makes use of language that hasn't been pumped up in some way. It shows action rather than telling it. Not all tragedies succeed in doing this, but you'll see what happens rather than hearing about it most of the time. Scary stuff needs to happen in a tragedy. And once that scary stuff is over, the audience will feel catharsis. And that's the thing. The closest thing I can compare tragedy to in a modern context is probably a horror film. That moment in a horror film when you know the credits rolling and nothing else bad can happen, so you get that sigh, that's your moment of catharsis, your moment of release, your moment when you know you've been let down and the rising tension is finally let off. Okay, that's what you need to have a tragedy or an effective tragedy in any way. What else does every great tragedy need? Every great tragedy needs a hero. And here's our word, heros. And this is the same kind of hero we learned about when we were reading about the adventures of Odysseus and Homer, right? The same kind of hero we were reading about when I told you about the hero pattern and you learned about Perseus and Heracles. In fact, these are characters who sometimes show up in tragedies. So what does that mean? It means they have divine blood in their veins. Joe Schmo cannot be a hero. Hubris. And I do want to use Aristotle's definition of hubris here too. Hubris is defined in part by Aristotle as not just arrogance, that's just arrogance, but acting in a way that demeans another, not for one's benefit, but just to make the committer feel better. You commit an act of hubris. You do hubris. It's almost like a verb, right? So I can't say that it's hubris to say that I'm really good looking. I would say that it's hubristic to make another person feel bad for looking the way he looks just to make myself feel better. Bullies act with hubris, right? Hamartia is another characteristic that will show up in a tragedy. Many of your teachers have probably missed the mark with explaining this one in the past too. Hamartia is not a character's fatal flaw. So please don't write that on your test. Hamartia is an archery term that means missing the mark. And this is when the main character tries to do the right thing, but screws up instead while trying to do the right thing. There's often peripeteia in a tragedy, and this is a crisis or reversal of fortune. And a reversal of fortune is not a good thing. There's never a positive reversal of fortune. And this means something bad happens. As a result of the peripeteia, the character often gains some sort of gnosis. And gnosis is a Greek word meaning knowledge or self-knowledge. You find out something more about who you really are or what's really going on. Lastly, the audience gains catharsis, and I explained this earlier. This is the release that the audience gains when the tension that has been ratcheting up for the entire play finally lets off. right? So this is nothing that the characters in the play experience. This is for you, the audience. Let's take a look at the Oedipus myth for a second, and then we'll talk about Sophocles and Sophocles' treatment of the Oedipus myth. Oedipus is a character who's interesting to us. His name means swollen foot, and we'll see why when we learn more about the story. He grew up as a prince in Corinth in the household of King Polybus and Merope. Right? And Corinth, for those of you who are interested, is on the Peloponnesus, but just barely, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes from Athens. It's not far away. When he was a younger man, he was at a party at his parents' house, and a guy who had had too much to drink said to Oedipus, "You're not your father's son." Horrified by this, Oedipus left and traveled to Delphi to find out the truth about his birth. And when he asked the oracle about his birth, the oracle told him the following. He was destined to have sex with his mother. He was destined to have children with her that nobody could bear to see. And he was destined to kill his own father. So Oedipus, not wanting to do any of these things, left Delphi and traveled towards Thebes. On the way to Thebes, something bad happened. He ran across two men on a chariot. He didn't get out of the way, and when he didn't get out of the way to let them by on the road, one of the men in the chariot hopped down from the chariot and started hitting Oedipus. Well, Oedipus struck him back, and not only did he strike him back, he also attacked the driver of the chariot, killing him, and he left him there by the side of the road. When he arrived at Thebes, he found a city in trouble. The locals were plagued by a sphinx, and for those of you who don't know what a sphinx is a creature with the body of a lion and the wings of an eagle and the head of a woman. And the sphinx was doing the following to the inhabitants of Thebes. The sphinx was asking inhabitants who would come out of the city to answer a riddle. Those who could not answer the riddle, she would kill on the spot. What was the riddle? What goes on 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 in the evening? Well, when Oedipus showed up to Thebes, he knew the answer to this, and that's man, because as a baby he crawls on all 4s, as a grown man he walks on 2 legs, and as an old man he walks on a cane, giving him 3 legs. The Sphinx, so distraught by Oedipus' answer to her riddle, threw herself off of a cliff to her own death. After she threw herself off the cliff, Oedipus was acclaimed king of Thebes, and something even better happened. He got a wife in the bargain. Oedipus married the recently widowed queen of Thebes, named Jocasta, and through a kind of odd arrangement in the ancient world, was able to share power equally with her and her brother Creon, and he'll play a prominent role in the play we're going to go over. Oedipus, with his new, older wife, had 4 children and loved them dearly. And that, from Oedipus' perspective at least, brings us to the beginning of our play. In its simplest terms, the play is kind of a whodunit. At the beginning of the play, Thebes is yet again under a plague, and they can't figure out what the problem is. Finally, a team that's been sent out to Delphi to find out what the problem is comes back and tells them that the man who killed the king of Thebes must be driven out of the city of Thebes. Oedipus does not know that he's the man who killed the king of Thebes, and spends most of the play trying to solve the mystery of who killed the king of Thebes. In the process, he'll find out something much worse. In the process, he'll find out that he was born in Thebes, the child of Laius and Jocasta, and when a baby, they had pinned his feet together with a steel pin so that he couldn't crawl away, and given him to a shepherd to take them out to the country and fling them off the side of a cliff. Why would they try to kill a child? They tried to kill a child because Laius and Jocasta had received a prophecy saying that a child born to Laius would kill his father. Oedipus had been rescued from his fate. The shepherd gave him off to another shepherd who then brought him down into Polybus, the king of Corinth, who raised him as if he were his own. At this point in the play, the jig is up. Jocasta discovers to her horror that she's the mother of her husband and inadvertently the grandmother to her own children. And she goes into the castle and kills herself. Oedipus follows her in, and when he finds her swinging from her noose, he pulls the brooch pins out of her tunic, stabs his eyes out. Why? Because he doesn't want to see anymore, because his confidence, his overconfidence in his ability to fix the plague, has done nothing but cause harm. And he couldn't see what was right in front of him. A whole time. So much for the scary stuff. Let's talk about Sophocles and his treatment of this for a minute. Sophocles is an impressive guy. He actually lived 90 full years in the ancient world. That's a long time back then. He lived from 496 to 406 BCE. He was a successful military commander with the Athenian army, and he's the author of Oedipus the King and Antigone, amongst other plays. He revolutionized stage through the introduction of the third actor to the stage. He somewhat reduced the importance of the chorus on the stage. And Aristotle also credits him with the introduction of scenographia, or the art of scenery painting. Sophocles' plays were known for having lavish production values and really good set design. I said before that tragic plays sometimes concern themselves with modern issues. How can you do this if you're writing a play about something that happened before the Trojan War? And the answer is simple. Sophocles knew that the audience had a familiarity with the story. Everyone in the ancient world knew the Oedipus story. Everyone knew that he had slept with his mom and killed his own father. But Sophocles does something new with it. Sophocles turns this into a mystery, and the mystery gets us to the truth about how Oedipus came to bring plague upon his town. Well, what does this have to do with what might have been going on in Thebes at the time? Nothing. Sophocles didn't live in Thebes. He lived in Athens. Remember, it was taboo at the time to attack political figures directly in the form of drama. You could talk, though, about ancient mythology, and in so doing, allude to events in the present. What was going on in the present in Athens? Many believe that Oedipus the King was actually a critique of the Peloponnesian War that broke out around 431. Why did this happen? Pericles, an Athenian statesman, had, through his excellent rhetoric, that speech-making, had convinced the Athenians to go to war with Sparta. The war broke out in 431. It was followed by a horrible plague in 430. When the city fell under siege by the Spartans, the population of Athens doubled overnight, overwhelming the sewer system in the city. When the sewer system failed to keep up with the amount of sewage that was being put into it, a plague ensued. Well, Oedipus the King made its premiere in 429 BCE. And what does this have to do with the plague that struck Athens in 430? Well, everything. In the ancient world, they believed that if a murderer went unpunished, a pollution or miasma might hang over a city or place. Because of Oedipus's action and the fact that his town didn't expel him or punish him, Thebes has been undergoing a miasma and is suffering and can't seem to break free from this. In the same way, because of Pericles' politics, Athens was undergoing a plague, only not the figurative or dramatic kind. Sophocles is using a story about a mythological character who lived before the war in Troy to talk about what's going on in Athens right now. And you can think of Thebes as bizarro Athens. So in Athens, we have democracy. In Thebes, we have kingship, but a strange kingship where the authority is split three ways. In Athens, we don't practice incest. In Thebes, they do. In Athens, we don't have monsters. In Thebes, they do. So there's all kinds of deniability here for Sophocles. He doesn't have to worry that someone will see this as a direct indictment of Pericles. What are some themes that come up in this play? Ships. We're always riding the ship that's lost in a storm. The ship, of course, is the state. A lot to do with eyes and seeing. Remember, Oedipus can see, but he can't see what's right in front of him. Remember, Tiresias, the blind prophet, shows up in this play. He cannot see, but he knows what's up. Illness and pollution come up a lot. Oedipus often is presented or likens himself to a doctor, a hunter, a stranger, a sailor, a mathematician. He's always solving things. And a farmer, because he's making his town grow in his own eyes. A social critique of this kind wouldn't be possible in a society that wasn't democratic in some way. Sophocles trusts his audience to come to their own conclusions, and they do, and they did. And for those reasons, people still enjoy watching this play to this very day.